Marcus Johnson had always believed that hard work and integrity would take him far. Fresh out of business school, he'd landed a coveted management trainee position at Sterling and Cole, one of the nation's fastest-growing consulting firms. On his first morning, he stepped into the gleaming high-rise lobby in a tailored navy suit, greeted by polished receptionists and the hum of ambition. By lunchtime, he'd already impressed senior partner Claire Whitaker with a sharp analysis of a client's market expansion strategy and been quietly tapped to lead an upcoming pitch. For 6 months, Marcus poured every ounce of energy into Sterling and Cole's flagship retail account, building financial models late into the night and coaching his junior associates through mock presentations. His teammates, mostly white, many of them Ivy League alums, nodded appreciatively as his forecast predicted a 15% sales bump. At holiday parties, partners greeted him as one of us, while clients praised his detail-oriented approach and calm confidence. Then, the small cracks began to show. During a brainstorming session, one colleague, smiling but with a sharp edge in his tone, remarked, "You know, Marcus, sometimes clients expect someone they can relate to at the table." Another suggested moving Marcus off the client-facing team after an all-hands meeting. Whispered jokes circulated, "He's great, but let's keep the front lines local." Marcus felt the sting each time, even as he continued to meet every deadline and exceed every quota. He wondered if he'd misread the room until a senior associate left his desk to take a private call. Marcus heard the words clearly. "I don't care how good he is. They won't sign off on a black consultant in a suit." Heart pounding, Marcus confronted his mentor, Emily Chen. She looked pained. "I wish it weren't true," she said softly, "but I've heard whispers from upper management." 2 weeks later, at a 7 a.m. meeting in the glass-walled boardroom, CEO Alan Sterling delivered the news. Marcus sat across from 5 senior partners, flanked by HR's rigid newcomer. Sterling's voice was all business. "Our retail clients board has expressed concerns about cultural alignment. Despite your strong performance, we have to let you go." Marcus's world went silent. He rattled off questions, metrics, performance reviews, client surveys, but Sterling cut him off. "Your work is exemplary. This is strictly about fit. We'll provide a severance package and a glowing reference." Walking out, his ID badge clipped to his bag like a tombstone, Marcus felt betrayal and rage coalesce into determination. That afternoon, he called his mother. "They fired me for my skin color." Her tears over the phone only steeled his resolve. "Don't let this define you," she said. "You're better than they will ever know." That evening, Marcus sat alone in his apartment, the city lights flickering through the blinds. He opened a fresh document titled Plan for Reinvention and began to type networking strategy, personal brand overhaul, seed funding prospects for a new venture, anything that would turn this unjust setback into the starting line for something greater. As midnight approached, Marcus closed his laptop and stared into the dark horizon. The suit he'd worn to Sterling and Cole felt like armor he no longer needed. One thing was clear: losing this job would not silence his ambition, nor dim his conviction that equality and excellence belong to everyone, regardless of skin. In that decisive moment, Marcus Johnson vowed that 1 year from now, he would not merely rebound, he would lead. The morning sun slanted harshly through his living room blinds as Marcus Johnson stared at the blinking cursor on his laptop. His severance check lay crumpled in the corner, a reminder that corporate prestige could evaporate overnight. He had 2 choices: let bitterness fester or forge a new path. He chose action. Over the next week, Marcus crafted a bold pitch deck for Equity Edge Consulting, a boutique advisory firm dedicated to fostering truly inclusive business strategies. He tapped every contact from business school and Sterling and Cole, sending personalized emails. "Let's redefine corporate culture together." Responses trickled in. Some polite declines, a few "keep me posted," and one surprising invitation from an old client at a regional grocery chain who wanted help improving minority-owned vendor programs. Marcus accepted eagerly, conducting his first paid engagement under Equity Edge's banner. He spent long days visiting distribution centers, interviewing small Black and Latino-owned suppliers who'd struggled to secure shelf space. He crafted a data-driven report showing that diversifying vendors could boost the chain's revenues by 12%, proof that inclusion and profit could go hand in hand. When he presented his findings, the client's procurement director leaned forward, eyes bright. "This is exactly what we need," she said. Within days, Equity Edge secured a 6-month retainer and a generous referral to a national convenience store chain. Encouraged, Marcus rented a small office near downtown, a shared workspace painted in vibrant murals. He hired two associates, Priya, a whiz in data analytics, and Carlos, an HR specialist with a gift for empathy. Together, they refined Equity Edge's methodology, unconscious bias audits, inclusive leadership workshops, and KPIs tied to diversity outcomes. Evenings blurred into weekends as Marcus built slide decks in coffee shops, rehearsed client proposals on park benches, and answered late-night calls from Priya sorting through survey data. But momentum came with setbacks. A major pitch to a Fortune 500 tech firm fell through when an executive whispered that real change was a distraction from their growth metrics. Another prospect ghosted him after meeting his non-traditional team. Each rejection stung with familiar prejudice, but this time, Marcus let it fuel him rather than crush him. 6 months in, Equity Edge hit its first milestone, a 3-year contract with a leading regional bank pledging $250,000 annually toward community investment training and board-level diversity goals. The announcement garnered local press. "Fired consultant reinvents the playbook on inclusion," read the headline. When his mother congratulated him over the phone, her voice trembled with pride. Marcus realized that every closed door at Sterling & Cole had led him here, to a firm built on his convictions rather than corporate conventions. As autumn leaves tumbled outside his office window, Marcus stood before a crowd of banking executives and community leaders at the contract signing. He thought of the morning he'd been told he didn't fit and felt gratitude instead of anger. He clicked to the next slide, statistics showing improved loan approval rates for women and minority entrepreneurs, and began, voice calm and confident, "Today, we prove that when inclusion is central to strategy, everyone wins." And as applause rippled through the room, Marcus Johnson knew the journey from pink slip to pivot was only the start of something far greater, a movement to redefine leadership at the highest levels and to ensure that no talented professional would ever be sidelined, again because of the color of their skin. By the start of the new year, Equity Edge Consulting had grown from a one-man passion project into a fledgling powerhouse. Marcus Johnson surveyed his team, Priya analyzing client dashboards in one corner, Carlos leading a role play in the conference room, and 2 new hires poring over vendor diversity scorecards. The firm's inclusion ROI model was winning acclaim for linking equitable practices to revenue growth. Their momentum peaked when Marcus received an invitation to keynote the National Diversity Leadership Summit in Chicago. Standing backstage at McCormick Place, he steadied his nerves beneath the harsh stage lights. Before him sat 800 C-suite executives, CEOs, and board chairs, each responsible for shaping corporate culture. Marcus took a deep breath and launched into the business case for belonging, weaving stories of small entrepreneurs empowered by Equity Edge's interventions and quoting hard data. Companies with diverse supply chains outperformed peers by 23%. His words struck a chord. Hands shot up in the audience. And during the standing ovation Q&A, a Fortune 100 CFO offered to pilot Equity Edge's model across his 25-state retail footprint. A venture capital partner in the front row slipped Marcus his card, murmuring, "Let's talk Series A." Back in the office, the team celebrated with late-night coffee and donuts. Marcus felt a surge of pride. Equity Edge was no longer just his second act. It was a force reshaping business norms. Yet he reminded himself that growth demanded vigilance. They drafted a scaling roadmap to maintain quality, expanded their training of trainers program, and invested in a proprietary analytics platform to track long-term inclusion metrics. 2 months later, after securing $5 million in Series A funding, led by that Chicago VC, Marcus stood once more at his office window, watching snowfall dust the city. He thought of the pink slip that had ignited this journey, and of every colleague and client who'd chosen vision over bias. With fresh capital, a growing bench of experts, and a national mandate for genuine inclusion, Equity Edge was poised to ensure that no professional, of any skin color, would ever again be sidelined for who they are rather than what they can achieve. By mid-year, Equity Edge Consulting had become the gold standard for weaving inclusion into corporate strategy. Marcus Johnson awoke one morning to 3 urgent calendar invites. A Fortune 50 retail consortium wanted him to chair their newly formed Diversity Council. The editor of Business Innovator magazine requested a cover story. And the board of NextGen Capital, a $20 billion investment firm, had unanimously voted to invite him to join as their first Chief Diversity and Impact Officer. As the LinkedIn notifications piled up, Marcus sensed that his work was no longer nice to have, but essential to the boardroom itself. In July, he flew to Atlanta for his Business Innovator cover shoot, posed in a tailored charcoal suit against a backdrop of verdant oaks. Marcus shared how a pink slip had reshaped his destiny and how inclusive supply chains and equitable leadership models would fuel the next decade of growth. The article quoted CEOs crediting Equity Edge's frameworks with delivering record profits and strengthened employee retention. Overnight, his face became synonymous with inclusion as innovation. The real turning point came at NextGen's September board retreat in Aspen. Over 2 days of strategy sessions, Marcus presented a 3-year impact multiplier plan, showing how embedding diversity metrics into every investment decision could boost returns by an average of 18%. When he concluded, the board chair, who had once doubted the business case, stood and applauded. By the retreat's end, Marcus was offered the unexpected role of interim CEO, tasked with integrating Equity Edge's proven principles across NextGen's entire portfolio. As autumn leaves tumbled outside his new office's panorama windows, Marcus reflected on the journey from termination to board leadership. He drafted his first memo as interim CEO, a directive tying compensation to diversity outcomes, a commitment to launch a $100 million equity growth fund, and a pledge to publish NextGen's equity scorecard publicly each quarter. When he hit send, an electric thrill coursed through him. In exactly 1 year, he had transformed from a man fired for the color of his skin into a nationally recognized CEO, proof that true leadership arises not from privilege, but from principled perseverance. By the first frost of winter, Marcus Johnson's title had shed its interim qualifier. At NextGen Capital's annual shareholder meeting in New York's landmark Woolworth Tower, the board chair rose to announce, "Effective today, Marcus Johnson is our Chief Executive Officer, fully entrusted to steer NextGen into an era where equity and excellence go hand in hand." Thunderous applause filled the ballroom as Marcus stepped to the podium, his tailored charcoal suit a symbol not only of his rise, but of the values he embodied. He began his remarks with quiet gravity. "When I walked away from Sterling and Cole a year ago, I never imagined a pink slip could become the pivot of my life," he said. "Today, I stand before you as proof that true leadership requires more than strategy. It demands courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to justice." His words rippled through the audience of investors, analysts, and fellow CEOs, reminding them that profitability and purpose are not divergent paths, but converging routes to sustainable success. In the months that followed, Marcus moved swiftly to translate vision into reality. He inaugurated the Equity Growth Fund, a $250 million pool dedicated to supporting minority-led enterprises across technology, healthcare, and clean energy. At its launch gala, he shared the stage with founders who, once overlooked by traditional investors, now held seats alongside him on panel discussions. A Black bioengineer harnessing stem cells to treat spinal injuries, a Latina entrepreneur revolutionizing affordable solar power for rural communities, and a Bangladeshi refugee whose fintech startup brought microloans to the unbanked. Their success stories underscored Marcus's conviction that inclusivity fuels innovation. Under Marcus's leadership, NextGen also pioneered the Diversity Catalysts program, an annual retreat pairing portfolio company CEOs with mentors, drawn from historically underrepresented backgrounds. Held on a lakeside campus in Vermont, the retreat combined leadership workshops, immersive bias interruption exercises, and collaborative hackathons. When the inaugural cohort devised a mobile app that connected displaced workers with micro-training modules, the prototype's buzz attracted additional development grants from state workforce departments and private foundations alike. Back at headquarters, Marcus overhauled NextGen's internal culture. He replaced the old bonus structure with a balanced scorecard system that weighted inclusion impact equally alongside revenue and risk metrics. Office walls, once dominated by charts of quarterly earnings, now displayed equity dashboards that transparently tracked vendor diversity, pay equity gaps, and employee resource group milestones. Town hall meetings opened with rotating Voices of NextGen segments, where entry-level analysts and administrative coordinators shared their lived experiences, reminding executives that policy only matters when it uplifts every rung of the organization. As spring thawed the city streets, Marcus returned to his alma mater, Oakwood University, to deliver the commencement keynote. Under the Gothic arches of Alumni Hall, he addressed the class of 2027. You will inherit an economy shaped by global challenges and deep inequalities, but you also inherit the proof that a single individual's resolve can shift the entire ledger of opportunity. Use your skills to challenge the status quo, to design systems that reward everyone, and to lead with empathy as your compass. That summer, Forbes named Marcus to its 30 Under 30 Hall of Fame, and Fortune magazine cited NextGen as one of the 10 most admired companies for social impact. Yet for Marcus, the greatest accolade came on a humid August evening in Crestview, where a community college student who'd benefited from the Marathon Scholars Program stood to deliver a valedictory address. She spoke of how an early scholarship, seeded by Marcus's first charitable run, had transformed her dreams from doubtful whispers into confident commitments to become an aerospace engineer. Tears glistened in the audience, and Marcus felt at once humbled and vindicated. His journey from pink slip to CEO had indeed reverberated far beyond boardrooms, lighting the spark of possibility in lives once dim by prejudice. As autumn leaves turned maple gold, Marcus settled into his office high above the city, flanked by framed letters of gratitude from students, entrepreneurs, and resurgent clients alike. He gazed out over the skyline, an ever-evolving tapestry of promise, and allowed himself a rare moment of stillness. Then he turned back to his desk, where an incoming email bore a single line in its subject: "Let's expand to emerging markets." With a steady hand, Marcus clicked "Reply," ready to write the next chapter in a leadership story defined not by the color of skin, but by the brightness of opportunity he had fought so hard to illuminate. Sprosit ChatGPT. By early spring, NextGen Capital's boardroom buzzed with anticipation. After 18 months of record-breaking returns, tied to Marcus Johnson's equity-driven strategies, the firm was ready for its initial public offering. Marcus stood before a wall of digital tickers, reviewing the final prospectus drafts. The Equity Growth Fund headline had already attracted $2 billion in anchor commitments from institutional investors who once scoffed at social impact metrics. Now, as Marcus prepared to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, he reflected on the journey from pink slip to public CEO and the unprecedented mandate he carried. On IPO morning, Marcus strode onto the trading floor in a crisp navy suit. Cameras from Bloomberg and CNBC captured his ascent to the dais. He placed one hand on the bronze bell and, looking out at the sea of traders, declared, "Today, NextGen Capital redefines value, not just in dollars, but in the lives we uplift. Welcome to the next era of inclusive prosperity." He rang the bell. Tickers flipped to NGC plus 32% in the first hour. Cheers erupted as NextGen's market cap soared past $8 billion. But for Marcus, the real victory lay beyond share price. Within minutes, emails flooded his inbox from global development agencies, asking how to replicate EquityEdge's inclusion model in emerging markets. Over the next quarter, Marcus led NextGen's first Global Inclusion Summit, a 3-day conference in Dubai attended by sovereign wealth funds, development banks, and government ministers from 20 countries. On stage, he unveiled Inclusion X, an open-source framework for embedding equity in investment decision-making across borders. He showcased case studies, a microfinance consortium in Southeast Asia using Inclusion X to double female-owned small business loans, and a clean energy fund in West Africa that boosted local contractor diversity by 60%. Back at headquarters, Marcus empowered a new Global Impact Council, co-chaired by partners from Nairobi, São Paulo, and Singapore, to adapt Inclusion X to local contexts. Teams of consultants deployed to emerging markets, training governments on data-driven bias audits, and advising corporations on equitable procurement. Within 6 months, Inclusion X had been adopted by 3 national development banks and featured at the United Nations High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. Meanwhile, NextGen's Equity Futures Fellowship sent more than 30 top scholars from historically excluded communities to leading universities in Europe and North America, funded by a $50 million endowment seeded at the IPO. Fellows, like the Bangladeshi fintech founder and the Nigerian clean tech innovator, returned to their home countries to launch ventures that tapped into NextGen's network, forging a new generation of inclusive global entrepreneurs. As autumn's first chill settled over the city, Marcus received a video call from a group of Mumbai retail workers who had used InclusionX to negotiate living wages and career development programs, actions that led to a 25% sales increase and dramatically improved worker retention. Their heartfelt thanks moved him to tears, proof that principles incubated from his own dismissal could now dismantle barriers halfway around the world. That November, NextGen's annual impact report, published for all investors to see, showed $12 billion in inclusive investments across 45 countries, 30% average revenue uplift for portfolio companies, with diversity benchmarks, 200,000 individuals enrolled in Equity Futures fellowships. At a small after-party in the CEO suite, Marcus raised a glass to his executive team, Priya, Carlos, and the global council chairs, each representing the movement he'd sparked. From a firing to a public offering, our every step has championed the belief that equity powers excellence, he toasted. As snow began to dust the city skyline, Marcus stepped onto his office balcony and gazed out at a world changed by one man's refusal to accept prejudice. He realized that the pink slip which once threatened to end his career had become the first step in a marathon of global inclusion, one whose finish line would be drawn only when every professional in every corner of the globe stood on truly equal footing.